Hello, everybody. Hello. I wanted to talk about black sheep, well, the idea of black sheep, only because it's something that I've sort of identified with in the past. I sort of have alchemized that phrase to make it more empowering. But I feel like I want to have this conversation because I feel like a lot of people believe like being a black sheep is not necessarily a great thing, and it carries a lot of shame. So I want to go into a deeper discussion about that. But before I get started, I do want to say that we have crossed over 1,000 subscribers, which is wild to me. And I just wanted to send a shout out to everybody who has subscribed to the channel. I really appreciate your support. And I do hope that you are receiving something out of this channel, out of the topics, out of the discussions and conversations. At the end of the day, my sole mission of this channel is to create a space where people can actually have genuine, real changes, not superficial changes. And I do believe in the idea, and this goes back to if you're familiar with Ram Dass, who mentions like we're all just kind of like walking each other home and we're all just mirrors for each other. And I believe that the only way that we can be free is by dismantling the illusions that are and the delusions and the distortions that we have come to claim as truth, which aren't truths. And what I'm referring to is the distortions of fear, the distortions of self doubt, the negative self belief systems that we've adopted based on maybe, childhood trauma or whatever else that we've experienced in life that prevents us from moving forward and living lives that are indeed beautiful, balanced, whole, and connected. I believe that's what we're here to do. I understand there's a lot of chaos happening in the world right now. And so the more that we can raise our frequencies, which is healing, the better the world can be. And that's really what this channel is about, is to create the space where people can tap into their own uniqueness, tap into their own personal power, and know that they are the ones that are creators. They are the ones that can create their lives, regardless of what the system says and regardless of how the system is set up. I don't believe that we just came here to just be miserable and sad and then die and be done with it. We came here to live our utmost potential and to remove any of the barriers that get in the way of that potential, that wholeness. And so I feel like until we're all free, none of us are free. So my mission is just to create the space where we can do that. So anyway, so let's get into it. Again, thank you if you have subscribed to the channel. Ooh, I almost dropped my laptop. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for being a subscriber. I do get emails, especially if you're on the Thrive newsletter. People are constantly responding to those emails as well. And I'm really glad that you're a part of the community. Thank you for your support. It's a channel that still is growing day by day. And again, I just hope that you are getting something out of it, right? And um, and I'm just really grateful for all of you. And we're just going to continue going until the wheels come off, kind of thing, right? So let's go ahead and get started and uh, dismantle this black sheep myth immediately, because a black sheep is not the rebel. Often they're viewed as that. They're not the troublemaker. They're not the misfit, not the one who can't get their life together. You've heard that before, I'm sure. Being the black sheep was never the wound, it was the initiation. And that's just the beginning of the story. And so a black sheep is the person in the family who typically doesn't play along with the unspoken rules, who refuses to silence their instincts and notices what no one else is willing to acknowledge. Let me know if that sounds like you. Put it in the chat, in the comments below. Black sheeps tend to question traditions everyone takes for granted. They emotionally wake up before the people around them. And so a black sheep isn't some sort of outsider. They're actually an outlier. They are the ones whose awareness doesn't fit the family's patterns. And that difference creates tension. Growing up as the black sheep shapes you in ways most people just never understand. People throw the term around really casually. Oh, you're the black sheep of your family. But for people who actually lived it, who go through it, it's not quirky. It's not some sort of personality quirk, right? It can really shake the foundation of your entire life. And people don't become black sheep because, again, they're rebellious. They become black sheep because they notice what everyone is conditioned to ignore. So let's strip this down even deeper and get into the family structure. Families operate like small ecosystems with roles, rhythms, and emotional choreography that keeps everything stable. And so the black sheep is the one who typically doesn't move with that choreography, not because they're being oppositional, but because their awareness, their sensitivity, or pace of growth just doesn't match the environment that they're in. And you might have been the child who, if you identify with a lot of this, asked questions like, why things were done a certain way. I definitely was that child who questioned a lot of things. I questioned it until they told me to stop questioning it. And I'll get into my story a little bit later. But maybe you were the child that reacted differently than everyone else. Maybe you were the child who refused to pretend everything was fine, right? Maybe you were the child that noticed tension others sort of glossed over. Maybe you were the child that had these instincts that, again, didn't align with the group. And so families don't necessarily know what to do with that. So they label it. And that label becomes the story you carry into adulthood. Being different didn't make you the black sheep, but being aware did. And that distinction matters. And so this isn't about finding villains. It's about understanding the emotional ecosystems that you grew up in. Families avoid certain truths to stay functional. And so the person who won't play along threatens that whole entire structure. And so the black sheep becomes the emotional censor, the one who typically reacts first, the one who asks, again, the inconvenient questions that no one wants to answer, the one who exposes the blind spots of that structure. And so it's easier to just label the person who sees the truth than to deal with the truth itself. So, what does it feel like to grow up in that role? Again, if this resonates with you, leave a comment below and just say black sheep or whatever phrase resonates with you. But most black sheep internalize a mix of confusion, guilt, loneliness, and this pressure to sort of fix themselves and even like fit into the mold. But they have this subtle intuition that just won't go away. And so there's a younger version of you who tried to be good enough, tried to be agreeable enough, tried to be non-disruptive enough. That was definitely me when I realized, oh, I can't really disrupt this family structure. I'm just gonna, be quiet and not disrupt. And then at some point you realize if I keep doing this, I'm just gonna lose myself. And maybe you've already lost yourself in that process. And if I stop doing all these things, I lose them, I lose that connection. And that's the black sheep's core contradiction. It's authenticity versus belonging. But here's the deeper truth. Choosing authenticity was the moment your freedom began. Even if it came with a loss, even if it came with loneliness, separation. And so the pain wasn't from being the black sheep, the pain came from what you had to sacrifice before you stepped out of that role. And there's usually a moment, whether it's at a family gathering or you're on the phone, or maybe you're walking away from a specific interaction with somebody when something inside of you says, I really don't fit in. I don't feel like myself. And I don't feel like myself anymore. And it's like realizing you've been wearing someone else's jacket. It kept you warm, sure. Maybe it helped you to blend in, but it never really quite fit. And once you notice the mismatch, you just can't unnotice it, right? You can't unfeel it. And that's the moment black sheep hit years before they can actually admit it. The moment the role starts slipping because you're growing into yourself. And so I love to offer reframes in this. You know, black sheep are usually the first in their family line to awaken. They're usually the pattern breakers, the cycle disruptors, the ones who walk out of the story everyone else is sort of still trapped in. And so losing the illusion of belonging doesn't feel like it's freedom. It almost feels like exile. But exile and expansion feel the same in the beginning. Imagine your family's in a foggy room where everyone sort of keeps the lights dim because dimming the light feels a bit safer. And you're the only one who's able to look at that door and think, why are we sitting in the dark? There's actually another way. Let me find that other way. And instead of them joining you, they ask, why are you being so difficult? But that moment you turned toward the door and found that other way, that was the initiation. It wasn't rebellion, it was clarity. It wasn't defiance, it was individuation, which just basically means becoming your own person. I resonate a lot with this because I feel like my entire life I was a black sheep. As someone who was raised with by my grandmother and my aunts and not necessarily my parents, I've always kind of felt like I was on the outside. And I've always just made different decisions and never quite listened to everybody. Sometimes that worked out for me, other times it didn't work out. But in the end, it always works out the way it needs to work out. And I've always been the one who just made these what looked like crazy decisions, but they were just decisions that felt authentic and aligned to me. Like I was the first person who moved out of my hometown, like down the street, not down the street, but in the next city over. I was the first person to move out of the state. I was the first person to move out of the country. I was the first person who had a kid at a young age. So I did all these things. I mean, that's like not a black sheep moment, but I was always the one who just did things differently, thought differently, always wanted to explore, always wanted to question things like, why are we doing this way? And that would get me into a lot of trouble. And it was silenced a lot, especially in my family structure. And so I had to do a lot of healing around being able to use my voice for truth, for connection, for fulfilling my own needs. And I had to get comfortable with just being on the outside. And I started to realize that it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It just meant that I was willing to take some risks that people weren't. And again, it took me a long time to get comfortable with being on the outside because when you're sort of labeled as the black sheep or when you feel like you're the black sheep, uh, it takes a long time before people actually join you on the outside. And sometimes people never fully join you. You might find your pack as you're sort of moving about the world. And and then you realize, oh, this is worth it. It's worth being my fullest and most authentic self because now I look at certain people in my life and it almost feels like they're missing out, right? Because they're kind of holding on to a certain story that reinforces that family structure that's rooted in that particular pain, particular trauma, and particular cycle. And there's always somebody in the family, again, that is there to break the cycle. And so when you refuse, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, to step into the role as the sort of black sheep, the one that just thinks outside the box, you're falling into the pattern of reinforcing a cycle that needs to be broken. And it doesn't have to be like this huge decision to break things. It could literally be as simple as saying no to things, saying yes to things. Like you don't need to move across the country and buy a one-way ticket like I did. It doesn't have to be that on that kind of grand scale. It just needs to be authentic to who you are and to no longer be held back by that fear of what people will think. Like I still work with clients who still struggle with that, to step into their own selves. When I mentioned the word individuation, like that's what we're here to do. We're here to find our uniqueness. We're here to build our own worlds, our own lives. And we're here to separate ourselves from the herd, from the pack, and create lives that are specific to our uniqueness. But we need to step outside the mold to discover what that uniqueness is. And if we don't, then we're going to be living some other people's lives, or we're going to be living under the rules and words of old conditioning from our family members. Like sometimes I have conversations with my clients, I'm like, yo, whose voice is in your head? Like, who is saying those things? And they have to stop and think, wow, like that's my mom, that's my dad, that's my aunt. Like those are the voices that are replaying. And until you sort of find, allow yourself to rediscover that through unconventional paths, you might still be kind of replaying those things. Yeah. So, but let's continue. Let's continue. Let's continue. Being yourself can sometimes often feel like you're betraying your family roots or the structure that you grew up in. But it isn't betrayal, it's just truth. It's living in full authenticity. This is guy, an author, his name is Ben Crawford. He wrote a book called 2,000 Miles Together, and he describes three paths black sheep often take. And these are real psychological crossroads. Most people move through a combination of them over the years. It could be all three of them, it could be two of them, but they're usually moving in and out. And so here they are. So the path one is living authentically, like I've spoken already, even when the cost is super high from the outside. And this path may look simple. It's like, oh, I'm just going to be myself. I'm going to go. But from the inside, it's anything but simple, right? It means challenging all those norms and belief systems that sort of kept you in that family structure. But it often means, like I said earlier, telling the truth when others want your silence. They want you to be agreeable, right? It's refusing behaviors your family often normalizes, and you're looking around like, oh, this ain't normal. Like this isn't what is normal, but this doesn't make sense, right? It's questioning beliefs taught as absolutes. Oh, we don't do this thing in our family. Uh, why, right? It's choosing emotional health over comfort. It's stepping onto a path no one else understands, and being okay with continuing to step on that path, even when people are like questioning you or looking at you or even judging you. And so, if you walk this road long enough, and you stop fitting the version of your family, what your family expects, or whatever structure you grew up in, sometimes that creates distance. Sometimes it creates conflict, sometimes complete separation. And it's not because it's what you asked for, but because authenticity pushed you beyond what the actual system, the actual structure could actually hold. And so alignment can cost everything that felt familiar. And so people on this path often rebuild their entire lives, sometimes from the ground up, right? They have new communities, new values, new boundaries, new ways of relating, new ways of connecting. And this is not out of uh, heroism, but it's literally created out of survival. So that's path one. And then path two is leaving and rebuilding from the ground up. And this path is its own heartbreak. It looks like leaving earlier than you are ready. A lot of us may have had to leave our households before we could wrap our heads around it. So it could be around like getting kicked out as a kid or a young adult, walking away after repeated conflict, the family choosing distance, closing the door on you, and you having to sort of deal with that decision, or something breaking within that structure that literally cannot be repaired, and having to live with that sort of grief. And so some black sheep lose their entire foundation, whether it's financially, emotionally, socially. Rebuilding is actually literal, working multiple jobs, maybe finishing school, figuring out boundaries, identity, and belonging all at once. And that's what makes it so challenging. And so this path matures you really quickly. It teaches self-reliance as a requirement, and it often feels isolating, overwhelming, and often, again, like, damn, maybe I betrayed my family. But distance, what it does beautifully, it creates clarity. Your perspective expands, and eventually you realize you didn't just leave a home. right? You left a version of you that literally couldn't exist there. Like it was self-preservation that made you decide to take that path. And the last path is path three, where some people might be here, is hiding your true essence to kind of stay in that family structure or whatever room that you're in. And again, this is the most common path, but it's also the most painful, I believe, out of the other two paths. And it looks like dimming yourself, muting certain things about yourself, because now you're sort of anticipating reactions, you're avoiding conflict, maybe you're self-monitoring your self-monitoring your how you feel about things and monitoring other people's feelings, and you're becoming who the family needs you to be. So you're performing instead of connecting. And you know you don't necessarily fit into that structure, but you also know you need connection. So you contort yourself, you make yourself fit. And this creates chronic self doubt. It creates emotional exhaustion. And it makes you confused about your own identity structure. And it also makes you very sensitive to criticism. Your boundaries are kind of shaky or even blurred. And so relationships are built on adaptation and not truth or authenticity. And many people, they stay here for decades, and they're close enough to be alone, but far enough not to be understood. But hiding always collapses under the weight of self betrayal. And eventually, people move into path one or path two. Like I've seen people who are like in their 60s who are finally choosing themselves for the first time, 50s, 40s. And this happens to a lot of us. And so, whatever path you took, whatever path you're considering, whatever path you're, thinking of taking, or wherever you see yourself on this journey, just know it's a response to the emotional climate. And people rarely applaud your choices, okay? Just know that when you make that decision, there's not going to be an applause on the other end unless it's coming from me. And they're going to misunderstand you, but it's okay to be misunderstood. And they think that your departure was maybe arrogant, defiant, when it was really you just getting direction. You're not rejecting the family, you're responding to your own personal truth. You weren't running away, you were being pulled towards something larger, bigger than yourself. Sometimes this is the doorway of no return, because once you choose yourself, the illusion around you just collapses. And yeah, it's painful. It's a painful experience. And so here's the heart of it. It didn't hurt because you were the black sheep. It hurt because you carried what wasn't yours, right? You blamed yourself for others' discomfort. You believed their story about you. You mourned a version of family that they couldn't be. And you wanted belonging without constantly having to leave yourself at the table. And so the pain was the price of awakening. Awakening is uncomfortable, right? Observation is uncomfortable, truth is uncomfortable, but these are the things that will free you, that will create the life of ease, peace that you're looking for. And so if this is resonating, let me know in the comments, and just say, yeah, man, that's resonating. If it's not resonating, no worries. And of course, if you're trying to figure out any of your patterns, I do have that free quiz, what's your resistance style, that will really shed some light into what pattern is coming up for you. And it also gives you immediate feedback, and it gives you a path that you can like take immediately to start transforming those belief systems. Feels more empowering. So definitely check out the resistance. What is your resistance style quiz below? And from there, you can take the free mini course that goes a bit deeper. But what we're going to talk about now is the release, how being the black sheep becomes liberation for you. And I believe it's almost like the hero's journey in essence. But the moment that you stop trying to fit the role is the moment you begin your life. A lot of clients ask me the same questions, like, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I stop feeling this way? And part of this is taking an unconventional path. Part of it is accepting yourself for all that you are. because without acceptance, you really can't move forward if you're still rejecting the parts of you that maybe are hard to look at. But the reason I say that being a black sheep is a path to liberation, because being a black sheep teaches you to develop emotional independence and sometimes emotional interdependence, because then you create the space and opportunity to meet teachers and guides and friends along the path that you probably would not have met had you stayed within that family structure. And it teaches you how to listen to your own inner signals, because now it's not being buried underneath the family structure, somebody else's voice. And it allows you to question inherited beliefs. Just because you're a part of something doesn't mean it needs to continue for the rest of your life. And being a black sheep also creates an opportunity for you to rebuild boundaries or build boundaries that protect your safety, your sanity, and your peace. And you grow beyond the family's emotional ceiling. Some families, their emotional ceiling isn't that high, hence why there's so much conflict. And by you stepping onto that path, you're able to expand that in a way that helps break, again, those generational cycles. Along the way, like I said earlier, you find people who see your truth, who see you for who you are and accept you for who you are. But if you're still in that structure, you ain't gonna find your people. You're not authentically. You're gonna find people who are gonna reinforce the story that you've been living in, the wounded story. But genuinely speaking, it's gonna be very hard for you to find your people. In every myth, someone leaves the village first, not because they hate it, sometimes it is, but because they feel the call to something that's just larger than them. And you answered that call, even when it felt like survival, like self-preservation. And so freedom after that doesn't look like recognition. It's not some sort of gold medal that you receive. Like I said, there's no applause, there's no um, recognition of that, because sometimes when you leave, it reinforces a truth within that structure that they refuse to look at. So what happens is it becomes a recognition of who you are without the role, without the family structure or systems that are binding you. There's a recognition of what you value, what you can no longer tolerate. There's so much clarity that you get from doing that, from making those kinds of decisions. And so the distance between authenticity and approval, you begin to recognize, oh, am I being my most authentic self, or am I just doing this for approval? Am I bending myself in different ways? You begin to build a life that is aligned to you, that makes sense for you, the life that is completely yours. And so being the black sheep, it didn't damage you. It separated you from a life that literally couldn't grow with you. And in that painful, disorienting separation, you gained something very rare that a lot of people don't get to meet. And it's a self that is not shaped by conformity. You get to live a life that wasn't chosen for you, that you actually chose for yourself. And you get a sort of clarity that is completely true. You were never the misfit. You were just the first one making decisions finally, right? And so that movement is freedom. You were never meant to fit a small role in a small story from people who just never decide to leave the block, right? Who never decided to get off the sidewalk. And so being the black sheep was never meant to hurt you. Pretending did. Choosing yourself, stepping outside of that script, that was true liberation. So you weren't the misfit. You were the first one to wake up. And so your freedom began the moment you stopped pretending. And that's the true gift of being a black sheep. That's the initiation. And ultimately, that's the message. I hope this message was helpful for anyone who is sort of struggling on the outside a little bit, who believes that they're an outsider when they're really just an outlier. And I hope that it gives you a new perspective of how to think about these things, and it gives you the courage to step into yourself. And as always, if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, share it with somebody that you know needs to hear this message. And as always, thank you for watching, and I will see you on the other side of change.